Morning, Deirdre.
Good morning, Tom. How are you today?
I'm great. What time of day do you think it is where I am?
Well, if that's where I think it is, it would be noon. It would have to be
Yes, that's
because there's
exactly.
only about an hour of daylight up that far north. That's Greenland.
Is it
Uh,
really? Now,
it is,
how could you so quickly tell this is Greenland?
well, the Scandinavian look of the housing, the different colors, the structure, but it's also the flat tops of the mountains.
Oh,
Uh, you think about that. That's as opposed to the Alpine or even the Scandinavian mountains or
yes,
so
very
forth.
good.
And I will say that's a very appropriate choice for our conversation today, actually.
So I know I'm going to misspell this. I mean, mispronounce this. Icelandic is the worst, but it's Upper Narvik in
No,
northern Greenland. So, Deirdre, let me just turn this back over to you. Am I doing this? Are you going to refresh or am I going to refresh on part one?
I do the refresh.
It's over to you.
Okay. Let me start everyone with a reminder of what we do. We help leaders navigate the now. We provide insights. We help them see how what's happening apply to them so that they can keep their businesses fresh and moving towards success. And last week, we started a series of videos on all of the changes going on right now, significant changes, not only in the United States, but throughout the world, with changes in government, changes in policies, and so forth. We called it an inflection point with the new US administration coming in. And frankly, Tom, over the past week, we've got to say that a lot has happened so that it's still an inflection point, a
Yeah.
tremendous difference here. So last week's video we filmed before the inauguration, clearly a lot has happened, and a lot of what has happened is going to be featured here in our video this week and also for the coming next week and the week after that. One of the points being interest in Greenland or
Yes.
in establishing stronger relationships with Greenland one way or the other. So, what we really discussed last time distills down into a few key points. One is the results now orientation, that people are going to be interested in seeing results now. Think about that statement, the results now orientation, in relation to how much change has happened in the federal government over this past week. In parallel, there's a low tolerance for institutions, leaders, employees, and so forth, not aligning with all of the change, not moving along at this rapid pace, not also aligning with the need for results now. Little tolerance for moving slowly, a lot of demand for people to move quickly. Another part of that is that people and institutions have to keep up. They cannot get stale. And we spent some time last week talking about this, that we're going to see or going to be able to discern the difference between the people and the institutions who are keeping up and the institutions and people who are stale. Now, by keeping up, I don't mean keeping up with the changes in the federal government. I mean keeping up with the changes in the business world, which may include governmental change, of course, but keeping up with changes in the use of technology, in new economic patterns, in marketplace demands, and so forth. You can't keep doing the same old thing and expect to be successful going forward. And then a final point here, a very important final point, is a movement from comparative restriction to openness. More opportunities for people to identify how to succeed in the marketplace, in the business world, and so forth. Unless a leader is very attuned to these factors, it's going to be easy to miss opportunities and miss the risks in what's happening in the business world going forward. But that's going to be one of the themes of our conversation today, how leaders can keep up see the opportunities, mitigate the risks, and achieve great success going forward. And with that, Tom, why don't I turn it over to you to take us further?
Okay. Deirdre, the first thought is that we're seeing stark differences in motivation
Yes.
among, and you named it earlier, institutions, people, government, marketplaces, marketing approaches. Um, it just, you can name it. And you see it right now it's occurring even in sports. It's just interesting to watch how there are a group of people moving very quickly to a different set of motivations. And then there are people that are just dead stop in the water and to the point of appearing stale.
Yes.
They appear old. So what does that mean? So in the picture I have in my own mind is it looks like they've turned around and are staring backwards and are commenting about what things used to be like. And they want to understand why they can't still fit the way they used to, or why things aren't happening the way they used to. Now, we've always been that way, right? I mean, people, as humans, we
Right.
always react that way. The problem is right now, as we've talked about, technology and a lot of other things have enabled communication, have enabled capabilities to have great leverage. And that great leverage now, we're seeing it. It is moving rapidly, and that is causing that motivation, the motivation changes to gather speed. And it's not always that they will maintain. It's just they seem to be going in that direction, and they may be taking a hard left, and then they're going to come slightly back to the center. But it's just watching what's going on. It's going to be really important that all of us, as you were talking about, Deirdre, that we look at our target markets, we look at our workforce, and we look at our partners. You like to call that the ecosystem in which we operate within,
Correct.
that we have properly seen where that is and where it's moving and how do we take the best advantage of it. Because what we're talking about here is how do you, as somebody who's building a business or running or operating a business, how do you incorporate these things or not incorporate them into what you're doing? So I'm
And
going to turn it back to you and let you give your thought.
right. I just want to elaborate on the concept of ecosystem now, because this is a general change in the marketplace we've seen over the past 10 years. At one time, it used to be that the big industrial giants, an IBM, a GE, or someone like that, could dominate a marketplace, could make decisions internally that affected everything in their marketplace. Well, the business world doesn't work like that anymore. All businesses operate within a system of the people that they sell to, the people they work with, the people they get supplies from, and so forth. I call this an ecosystem. You could call it a business environment
Mhm.
or a business platform, some people call it. It's the whole idea that businesses work with other people. And this is where alignment is very important. If you are not aligned with others in your business ecosystem, you may be held back, or you may find yourself doing work, forced into doing work that you don't want to do. This is why I talk to companies about the need to evaluate their ecosystems. You cannot assume, for example, that if you work with a distribution partner or a supplier, that you can continue to work with the same people, because we know, for example, supply chains are going to change tremendously over the coming years with tariffs and changes in the flow of business and all of that. Similarly, distribution changes are coming because of our different modes of distribution, different modes of availability, different routes even, and so forth. So that you have to make sure regularly, this is part of your strategic thinking, making sure that all of the people in your ecosystem not only provide value to you, but they also support your brand, that they don't interfere with your brand. If you've got someone who is stale in your ecosystem, it's going to reflect badly on you. And with that, Sidebar on ecosystems. Let me
Yeah,
throw it back to you to move forward.
no, that's very true. What what is fascinating is that in elaborating on your point, Deirdre, you and I use the term pitch perfect.
Yes.
And it is very difficult right now to know whether you're pitch perfect or not. And so let me tell you what I mean by that, Deirdre, because we were talking about this morning and I was not very articulate about this. But the point is, pitch perfect can be both off pitch and on pitch, right?
Yeah.
You can choose to decide that you're going to oppose what pitch perfect is. The problem is you have to construct a new opposing pitch that truly does match the pitch perfect, right? And this is the trouble that people are having is if you want to oppose, you have to oppose in the way of the new pitch. And this became in stark um, relief in listening to the arguments in California on what's allowed and what's not allowed for homeowners in their with their homes that have been severely damaged or completely damaged. Just listening to those arguments, it was the difference between a movement forward versus trying to hold back. But unfortunately, I'm sure there are really good arguments on holding back. They weren't used because what the arguments that were being used appeared to me, and again, I'm a novice in this stuff, so I'm just giving you my observation. Those competing ideas appeared to be old and stale. It looked like the people were looking backwards, and instead of thinking about how do I oppose what is being proposed, but how do I do it in concert? I'm making a good opposition. I think we're also seeing it in other realms. I don't want to get into details, but it doesn't take a lot to look and say that if you're going to, you need to be pitch perfect on both sides. You need to be pitch perfect on taking advantage of the market on a positive and also an opposing point because there are opportunities on both sides. And you and I talked about business opportunities. There's always a business opportunity for, and this comes starkly in technology. How do you implement technology with a generation that is sharp edged versus those that are very difficult to adopt, right? And
Yes.
you market differently. Those are opposing markets. The same thing goes through anything, whether it's social, whether it's political, whether it's governmental, whether it's whatever. And the only point about pitch perfect, Deirdre, is things are moving so rapidly, and the mainline pitch is so different right now because of the inflection. You not only, if you want to go with the market, you have to study that very hard and figure out where the opportunity is. And if you want to go on the other side, you have to study it hard and figure out where is that pitch that's properly opposing. So I'm going to stop and turn it back over to you to clean up my thinking here.
And one of the aspects of being pitch perfect is making sure the details are right,
Yeah.
that you can't say something or take a stand and not be able to back it up with the details that you put into the marketplace. For example, one aspect is, I believe, when you're talking about your target markets, what are the messages that are going to resonate with them? They may not be the messages that were thought to be appropriate 5 months ago,
Deirdre,
but
even last week,
even last week. But things like what are people's concerns? Inflation, the economy, various cultural matters, the rise of the use of artificial intelligence. These are all things on people's minds, and you have to know how your particular target audience is thinking on these points today for your message to be received. Otherwise, it's going to seem, well, he doesn't understand me, or they don't understand me, or she can't tell me what to do, or various crosses here which keep you from succeeding in the marketplace. Another one might have to do with if you're working with your supply chain and you want to use, say, environmentally friendly supplies, but your supplier has moved away from them and can only give you these things. You have to know how to get pitch perfect on what's not only possible, but resonates with you. This, by the way, may be one of these points where you're opposing what some people might think of as pitch perfect, but you have a reason for doing so. You want to claim to be environmentally friendly along those lines. So it's very important for people to think through all of the details to make sure that the assertion of pitch perfect is backed up. One of these could be in relation to the workforce. Um, People are being called back into the workforce. Well, why are they being called back? It would be very good for the government and for businesses to have reasons why people are being called back. And indeed, we've seen people articulate the reasons for this. But just a general, oh, come on back in, would not resonate with people as much as we need you in the office because of X, Y, and Z. Similarly, training has to get very specific. We're training you on this new software because that sort of thing, just to make sure that everyone is aligned around the reasons for the training, the reasons to be back in the office, the reasons for these marketing messages, and so forth. I think it's time for me to throw this back to you to move us
So
forward.
I'm just gonna expand on that because there's a great point you made, and it's personal. I spent a day learning a piece of software to use for our business, and it got shut down on the day I needed to use it.
Yes,
And so I went back to something I knew that had sustainability, and I deleted the other piece of software, right?
yes,
And why did I do that? Because I had wasted, I didn't, I'm not sure I would have known that that software had ties to TikTok. And it was because if I'd known that, I would have anticipated it was going to be shut down that Sunday. That was actually last Sunday. That tells you how
right.
fast things are moving. Um, and so as a result, I used the software that we had used previously, and I've gone back, and I'm not going back. Why am I not going back? There's too much risk in me losing time and productivity switching again.
Yes,
Right. So that's when you talk about this issue of training and so it gets down to those kind of decisions, which leads us to our second point, Deirdre, which is operational alignment. This is getting your thinking through as a leader, thinking through what does all this stuff mean to the way I operate? So this is your point. This is another point about you make about we can't continue to automatically assume what we are doing will still work.
yes.
Right. So spend a second on operational alignment, you're thinking on operational alignment.
Well, first, I'm going to mention a sore point with me that too many of the leaders we work with come out with a strategy and throw it out into the company and say, execute. And you and I both know that such strategies are going to fail because there has to be a direct tie between strategy and execution here. But nowadays, if you're going to be taking advantage of opportunities in this new marketplace, in this new business world, your strategy has to be aimed at those particular opportunities, which means also that the execution must directly support those opportunities. And some of the things that we talk about in relation to operational effectiveness is your infrastructure right? Do you have the right technologies in there? Do you have the right workforce to use those technologies? Can they accomplish what you want them to accomplish? Is your supply chain not only viable, but flexible enough to get you the materials when you need them? No, we've run into terrible supply chain troubles over the past few years. A major operational alignment is to make sure that you get your supplies in on time. Similarly, things like are your partners all aligned? Are you a priority? Can you get the work from a partner when you need that work? Or is a partner more focused on their own work and they'll slip you in when appropriate? You need to change that partner. You need a change in the ecosystem. What it's all getting down to really is making sure that you can do what you want when you want to do it. Now, there's another aspect of this that the whole concept of efficiency is floating around these days, government efficiency, business efficiency. But what this means is leaders need to make sure that their entire institutions are focused around doing the work at hand, the work that needs to get done. It is notorious in the business world for some departments and corporations to just exist decades past their lifespan, that they should have been terminated a while ago, but they're still around, they're still part of processes, while meanwhile efficiencies can come in. And there's no tolerance. Let me pick up that word from one of our things. There's no tolerance for some of this, oh, we've got to check with these people. Well, why? Well, we've always had to check with those people. That's an intolerance situation. Those people need to be moved aside, and you need to make your process more efficient, making sure that your processes do what has to be done without extraneous things interrupting your progress. It's a matter of cost, it's a matter of time. Remember, time's our friend or our enemy, as we've articulated many times. And it's a matter of just meeting the marketplace demands. When times are moving this quickly, you need to operate that efficiently. Back to you here.
Yeah, Deirdre, I think this whole point about operational alignment, I think it calls, what does it call for? I think it calls for those of us who lead companies to audit ourselves for low tolerance in the marketplace, audit ourselves for results now, audit ourselves for stale, right?
Yes,
Audit ourselves for, are we moving, are we adapting to the demands to be a little bit more open than we have been in the past? Um, and the other thing I would say about this is that a lot, I more prefer, as you and I both do, we prefer to stay on the opportunity side, not the risk
yes.
side, right? But there is going to be continuing arguments about who we trust and who we don't in this,
Oh, yes.
right? and so this whole issue of who we trust is going to continue to raise its head. I will give you an example. You and I, uh, we trust a certain set of AI providers.
Yes,
There are some we don't trust.
yes,
And we don't trust mostly because we don't trust the leadership. We don't trust the leadership. Why? We are not sure we understand or agree with, if we did understand, their motivations.
correct.
We're going to see a big one emerge here soon. I know it's happened already, but I'm not sure how public it is yet, but we will see it in the area of the future of AI and the future of the infrastructure investment that our country, along with our tech leaders, want to create to provide the supercomputing capability to enable the high-end use of AI and the
Mhm.
AI algorithms moving into quantum computing. So I would just say that the uh, one of the ways, not only as you're doing this operational audit, Deirdre, to look at low tolerance results now and how do you have, is there any staleness in what you're doing, including your own culture, much less your operations? And then moving to open, I think with it's are we trusting the right people? And I hate to put it out that way. I'd prefer not to get into as much risk, but I think there is a risk in all this as change occurs so rapidly to say, who do you trust in all this? Who do you trust that will guide you and help you make sure you're headed in the right direction? And again, who do you trust to provide you with what you need to operate?
And it gets back to what we were saying earlier about your business ecosystem or your environment or your platform. Can you trust the people who are in your current ecosystem, or do you need to replace them? Do you need to yourself build a different one and invite in only people that you trust? This is critical. It's you can't rely on past relationships. You
Yes.
know, the business world of, say, the 1950s was very big, and in the 60s too, probably. I don't remember it, but I understand this is what happened. Um, was big on the handshakes, the relationships, and so forth. And I think you and I also grew up in a time of handshakes and needing to work with people, but we also learned to be critical about the capabilities. Yes, I like this person, but can they do their job? Can they supply me what I want? Can they fill their part of all of this? This is a decision to be made as part of your operational alignment, operational effectiveness. It's going beyond what you might have traditionally done to look anew at every single point to make sure you can rely on it. And now I'm going to take this one step further also, Tom. We've been talking about some very tangible things, supply chains, things like that. Don't forget about ways of working and culture. That by ways of working, I mean, and this is a word you and I use all the time, and that's cadence. That you have to build into all of your processes a certain cadence of getting things done in a certain way, at a certain pattern, so that everything is aligned within your organization. If you need to have X part made before you can combine it with Y part, then you need to have the production cadences in shape so that the two meet at that same time. But it also happens in services businesses and so forth. Is that report ready because I needed to do these presentations? Then you have to have the cadences of work aligned, particularly when companies are going more to teamwork or in some informal organizations. Is the cadence of this team going to deliver what they have to deliver when I need it? Or are they taking their own sweet time about it and therefore I can't use what they're producing? It's a very important topic, and it's part of this whole efficiency. You've got to get your cadences down and communicate the expectations around them. You can't have a cadence in mind, set up a team, and not alert them that this is what you have to do by this time and this is why, just so they're all aligned with your thinking. But let me also take this further and say it's a cultural aspect that there are some organizations, and you've seen them, and we've both seen them and worked with them actually, where the work is more important than the results. And that's a cultural thing. Are we doing the work in the way we want the work to be done? Is everyone happy and so forth? But the results aren't there, and therefore the companies suffer financially. In fact, we've actually seen a couple of such institutions fail because of a lack of results. But this is why, even while you want to run a good company that people want to work for, as you have to focus on results, you need to make sure that everyone is focused on results, that all of your cadences lead to results, that everyone understands that their goals, individual as well as or entity-wide goals, are organized around delivering the results. Work flows along. This is your part in this, and this is when you have to get the work done. This is just pure, basic good management, Tom, something that you and I talk about all the time, just making sure everything that gets done when it needs to get done does indeed happen so that the results get delivered. And I'll suggest that in this new world that we're talking about, this sort of managerial effectiveness, operational alignment, and getting results is going to be just that much more important. Over to you.
Yes, I think you're exactly right. So the point about cadence is our third point for the day, that cadence of is going to become more and more critical is because of the speed and the change,
Yes.
right? Those two things. And what we've seen in the own work that we do, Deirdre, and this is why your thought about inspecting the cadences of your processes and making sure the pieces are still functioning correctly is even in our own work. Over the last month, you and I have changed our processes because the cadence of various pieces either have changed or are not changing.
Yes.
And you and I know where is the big bottleneck in ours. We know where it is. That's getting no better. It still is there. And we know exactly what it is, and we have to plan for it. Other things we can see changing quickly. So it's caused us to change how we do what we do. That's just in our place. We see it happening with everybody that we operate with, we help with their businesses. And this is why it's critical to do this. This isn't just, okay, it's a good time to take a look at operational effectiveness in our because it's January, right? This is about what we just talked about. Some businesses are really focusing on certain things, others are not.
Right.
Others don't care. Others say, "Well, we're working on it, but not for your size. For your size, we're not touching it. We're going to touch it for the people that are in the millions and billions, right?" And so, or billions, really, hundreds of millions or tens of millions. I think it's really important to, that's why this looking at your operation to make sure that your cadences still match, and that you're sensitive to that process down at that level. And because what we're seeing is the cadence of speed and change is occurring in the government, it's occurring socially, it's occurring in marketing, it's occurring in the marketplace, and it's occurring with opportunities. And this is the point you and I are making. With all this, there are market opportunities.
Oh,
And
yes.
that's what we're looking for. What are we seeing that we could give us an ability to move in a new area and be successful where there's a strategic gap? So the third point behind, number one being motivation alignment, number two being operational alignment, is three is this point about cadence of speed and change. It's just coming so rapidly. That leads to another point, Deirdre, that you brought up last time we did not get to explore very much, and we don't have a heck of a lot of time on our hands this morning, but it's decentralization. It's our last point of the day. We're going to move. There is going to be a part three. We already have it laid out. But the fourth point for today is about decentralization. Do you want to take and explain that one to us?
Well, what I was talking about last time was that under this administration, there is a drive to move things out of the federal government, out to the states or out to localities. And we're actually starting to see this in several fairly obvious ways. Over this past week, start with a very simple one that the federal government issued an order allowing Alaska to choose its own priorities for use of land. I believe the phrase I heard was, too many people think Alaska as a whole should be a national park. We want the Alaskans to make their own decisions about natural resources. Now, as you know, I'm an environmentalist and would love to see Alaska remain as untouched and beautiful as it is. But this is the argument that the federal government threw out there, and I understand that Alaskans really appreciate that. But that's an example of the decentralization. If this is coming through for Alaska, it's going to come through for other states as well that want to accomplish certain things with their resources. One fairly large thing, of course, is FEMA,
Yes.
the Federal Emergency Management Group, that FEMA has in the past had a very good reputation. There have been, right or wrong, uh, question marks around the effectiveness of their operations lately. And the incoming president is starting to talk about, let's decentralize emergency management. Let's let the individual states decide how they're going to handle emergencies. The federal government will make block grants to them So they have federal money to handle their emergencies, but let's remove some of the bureaucracy here and let the states get directly to work.
This is a
Now,
big deal, Deirdre. I mean,
it's a big
the
deal.
numbers I saw, and again, this could be subject to question. 3.5 billion, 17,000 employees.
Yeah.
That's a big organization.
Yes,
And there is talk about decentralizing and also eliminating, just
yes,
eliminating the function completely. Again, anytime you're involved in change or negotiation, right, there's always the how far do you push versus where does it going to end up? And that's a part of any negotiation or strategic goal. We see that in technology all the time where
right,
people over promise and over commit, not commit, but they talk about visions that may never be hit or may never be hit within the time period. But there is discussion along that also. And also the IRS, Deirdre, there's discussions about turning that into, we're actually disbanding it and turning it into, and creating an external revenue service to collect resources from or revenues from outside the United States with the objective to eliminate the income tax. Again, these are all ideas, but those ideas begin to move people's thinking in a certain way and provide opportunities. But those are huge. Well, in two cases, the ones you gave, FEMA and Alaska, that type of thinking is a decentralization and a putting power to operate lower,
right,
not centralize
right.
that power. Um, and then the other one is a fascinating thought process. Who knows whether it'll ever do it? But the idea is that you're going to see a change. You're going to see something,
Right.
whether it manifests that dramatically or not, who knows? But it's indicating there is a huge change. But I think you and I have studied this for a fairly long period of time now. With this inflection point, instead of it remaining where it was, which was a direction of centralization and restricting, it's moving to open and decentralize. And there's a whole idea about moving governmental structures out of the leading agencies out of the city of Washington, D.C., where it's not really a city, is it, Deirdre? It's called
It's a
something else.
capital territory or
Yeah, right,
something
right.
like, yes.
Yeah, I mean, you used to live there, right?
I
And you
know,
don't even
yes,
remember what it is. But
right.
we understand what we mean. It's but that decentralization is another major element that we're going to be facing. And we're just beginning to see the glimmers, but we know it's coming.
Right.
We know that's coming. Um, but do you want to spend any more time on that one before we go into just giving a preview on part three of
No,
fit
I
and
I
refit?
think we've covered that, except I'll just throw in here, everything we've been talking about uh, implies that companies that do business with the federal government and the state governments are going to have to pay attention. You know, like because things will be changing and your patterns of interaction with, say, the federal government may both provide opportunities or they may change the way you do business if you continue to do business at all. One area, for example, might be there's talk about defense supplies, reviewing the whole defense supply system, the weapons manufacturing, and something like that. For some companies, that might provide an opportunity, even while in some other areas, if there's a massive decentralization going on, as in FEMA, that might change the way that, for example, suppliers of safety equipment or recovery equipment actually sell into their possibly decentralized marketplace. So everyone has to stay aware here.
Yes, exactly. Our fifth point, and the one that we're going to explore next week, we're calling fit and refit. So
Yes,
it involves, okay, when you're looking at all of this that we've talked about, the 8 points we talked about, low tolerance, results now, staleness, moving to open, motivational alignment, and then operational alignment to match, and then cadence, speed of change, and then decentralization. Then it's back, okay, how do I fit? How do I fit as a leader in all this? And how do I refit whatever I need to refit? Or how do I get rid of and abandon and move on? Because we don't have a lot of room to maneuver in this to
Right.
stay moving forward and continuing to receive a profitable, an appropriate value exchange. So I'm going to turn it over to you for the last few minutes to summarize for us.
Well, what that last point comes down to is something we talk about all the time because it forms the basis of our radar screen, and that is the mindset of a leader. How does a leader maintain fitness, maintain the ability to do all of this necessary work going forward? And that involves maintaining your mindset, keeping up, reading, observing, talking with people, thinking about things, analyzing, taking training that you need. And we'll go into this more next time when we really get into the level of fit. But again, it all comes down to you as a leader, whether your mindset is able to take in all of the change that's happening and that you can then turn around and identify the opportunities and continue to lead your entity to success. So I'll stop on
Absolutely.
that point.
Well, uh, that is the point. That is the point. It's how do you make sure you're seeing it, you're interpreting it appropriately, you're then translating that into how to make it operate for you. How do you operate and how does your organization operate? And then how do you keep adjusting
Right.
because things are in rapid change. So with that, I will say it's always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure, Tom.